Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for waiting, but also thank you to people right across Northern Ireland for working with us. Over the last number of days, I have received many messages from people about the situation in Northern Ireland, and many are concerned about their health or that of their loved ones. Many are anxious and in some cases despondent about their jobs and businesses. And above everything else, people want to see an end to COVID-19 pandemic and all of the restrictions on their lives. And I understand and share many of those concerns and worries. And while some focus on our disagreements, I believe every elected representative, regardless of party label, is trying to do their best so that we can get through this pandemic together. However, there are no easy answers or solutions. The threat from COVID-19 is real, and our hospitals and sadly our cemeteries are testament to that. But we cannot keep closing the country down or forcing specific sectors to close in order to beat back this virus. That strategy, designed to buy time, is in reality a failure and will ultimately ensure despair engulfs all of our people, and we cannot allow that to happen. Every part of our society must adapt and learn how to live with this virus. This pandemic has already cost too many lives, too many restrictions on our liberties and within our families, and too many jobs, businesses and indeed shattered dreams. The impact on mental health will be unquantifiable for some time to come, and our health service, already in need of reform prior to COVID-19, is struggling to cope with the burdens of the pandemic, as well as the need to treat, of course, everyday patients. The rising number of COVID-19 cases meant action was needed to protect our hospitals, and doing nothing was not an option. On average, over 1,000 people are being diagnosed with the virus every day, and a rising number are being admitted to hospital. At the moment, 291 people are inpatients, which is just 10% less than the figures for the first wave earlier this year. And this is squeezing the provision of health care for other serious conditions. We know our hospitals are extremely busy, and we are grateful, of course, for the efforts of staff, but there are some signs that we can all take a degree of hope from. There are early indications that our shared effort is turning the tide, and there is a slowing in the rate of infection, albeit the rate is still at a high level. Our advisers are optimistic that we might reach a point soon where the average number of cases will begin to fall. They expect the peak of COVID inpatients to be similar to the spring, and that this might be reduced over the next week. Bed occupancy and ICU admissions are also likely to peak in the next 10 days. And in the North West, where of course tighter restrictions have been in place for longer, there is clear evidence of change, with a significant drop of 30% in cases. And I think the Chief Scientific Advisor went through some of those figures just yesterday. Across Northern Ireland, public transport usage, workplace and recreational activity have all decreased within the week. And when action is taken, we can drive down that R rate, but such measures, of course, also brings other costs. Now, we have sought to make balanced and proportionate decisions, taking into account the need to protect lives and livelihoods. And we must weigh up the long-term impact of restrictions and the effect that poverty has upon health. And with 5 parties around the executive table, of course, there will always be different approaches and different opinions. But looking forward, it is vital that plans and actions to take us through this pandemic are built on the foundation that the virus will be with us, yes, for some time ahead, but society must be able to coexist with it. Key to that must be increasing the capacity of our hospitals and the wider health service to deal with those increased pressures. And for our part, if we need support from other parts of the United Kingdom and/or the military, we will be prepared to support, of course, the Health Minister if he needs to ask for that. But central to a successful path forward too must be the scaling up of our test, trace and protect system, generating more detailed data from that and using the evidence to aid more precise and effective actions in the future. It is time to expand the tracing system and roll out a programme for weekly tests, if necessary, to ensure that our key workers are able to be in hospitals, in clinics, in classrooms, and indeed other vital services. Getting workers back from isolation, of course, in our health service is vitally important as well. So I want us also to work in partnership with those sectors who have been hardest hit. I've always said that our best asset in Northern Ireland is our people, our workforce, and we cannot expect them to continue to take the hit in the months ahead. So just as it was possible to return to schools in a safe COVID way, we must develop a sustainable model for our hospitality and close contact sectors so that they can reopen in a way that bolsters the trace and contact system and is designed to withstand the COVID environment that will exist in the period ahead. So we will work to support an increase in NHS capacity. We will support greater resources for test and tracing system, and we want to harness new testing technology to support our people in the months ahead. I want to reinforce this afternoon the healthcare workforce appeal for those with skills and experience to please come forward. Almost 3,000 applicants have already done so, but bear in mind that in the context of 2,700 regular health and care staff being off work for COVID-related reasons, it's important that we continue to make that appeal, and you can find further information on that on the website. I assure you that the present restrictions will not be in place for a moment longer than they need to be. But we do need to bear in mind that until there is a vaccine, that we are living with this virus for some time to come. It is key to our recovery and renewal that we adapt and we learn and transform the way that we deal with the risk of COVID-19. And we know that people are not just worried about their health, they're worried about their jobs, putting food on the table and making sure that the life chances of our young people are protected. And today, the Executive has agreed to provide funding support of over £1.3 million for payments in lieu of free school meals for the period of the 19th of October to the 23rd of October, and also to make funding available for the following week as well. Ministers will bring proposal next week to cover the second week of the extended second half-term break, and in an effort to try and assist families experiencing food vulnerability. And as we plan for exiting these restrictions and coexisting with the virus, we will need to plan and communicate for significant points of importance to our citizens: Halloween, remembrance events, Christmas and other faith celebrations and observances, and of course the New Year. And we have tasked our teams to draft plans for those fixed events. So over the next few weeks, please think about the large and the very small steps you can take to reduce your risk of exposure to the virus and make sure that you do not pass it on to others. Remember, the virus doesn't spread itself. Limit your contact with others as much as you can. Keep washing your hands regularly and often. And remember, it's not a pick and mix menu. A face covering must be worn in shops and other public spaces, but that doesn't mean that you can drop the social distancing rule. These are small steps, but together they can have a big impact. So in closing, the challenges we all face at present are without comparison in modern time, and every person in Northern Ireland can make a difference in the days, weeks and months ahead by observing the regulations, by following the public health messages. You can all make a real difference. So please help us, because together we can reignite the flame of hope right across Northern Ireland. Declan.
Thank you, Arlene. Tróna mai Dave Galair. We've sadly learned of further lives lost due to COVID-19 this afternoon, and we send our sincere sympathies to those families who have been bereaved. Janimish Covrone, Ochri, Linnamuncher. We are now 6 days into an emergency 4-week intervention to arrest the rapid spread of coronavirus right across our community. The restrictions that we have introduced are in place to protect people from the very real dangers presented by COVID-19, to alleviate pressures in the health and social care system, and crucially, to save lives. The evidence that these restrictions work is already beginning to emerge in Derry and Strabane. Following the localised restrictions introduced in that area, cases are continuing to fall, and the R rate in this particular region is now below 1. That progress would not have been made without the compliance of the people of Derry and Strabane, who have got behind the effort to drive the infection rate down, to keep their families and their community safe. So I want to say to the local community in Derry and Strabane, and to their civic and political leaders, thank you for your efforts thus far. Is tusmai yach na hibre, but there is much more to do. The evidence to date demonstrates that these restrictions will work, but they are only effective if everyone adheres to them. Maximum compliance is key in our ability to live as safely as possible alongside this virus until such times as we have an effective vaccination programme. And that means each of us following all of the basic but the crucial requirements to prevent it from spreading. So it's not a cliché for us to continue to repeat to you all. Limit your contact with people from other households. Do the basics, as Arlene said. Keep your distance, wash your hands. Wear a face covering. Download the COVID NI app. If you have symptoms, self-isolate straight away and book a test. And follow all of the restrictions that are in place. And importantly, we need to create a permanent culture of compliance and partnership within our community. The success of our collective efforts in the next 3 to 4 weeks in suppressing the virus will depend on a real authentic whole-of-government, whole-of-society approach. Isar scaha kela awaras ndini. We don't underestimate for 1 second how challenging this situation is for everyone. For our young people and for our elderly. For those in our society with special needs. And those who are most vulnerable. For our businesses, workers, and those who are facing real economic hardship as a direct result of this pandemic. And our focus as an executive is very much on ensuring that families, workers and businesses are getting every possible support and protection throughout this difficult period. The executive has agreed today that payments will be made to parents of children entitled to free school meals, covering the 2 weeks of the extended half-term break. No child should ever have to go hungry. And I'm pleased that our ministers have also agreed to take forward a programme to tackle food poverty and holiday hunger in the longer term. Earlier this week, our Finance Minister, Conor Murphy, opened a financial support scheme for businesses across all of our council areas, subject to the latest restrictions under the health protection regulations. So far, there have been over 8,200 applications to that scheme. The Finance Minister is determined to get that money out to businesses as quickly as possible. Land and Property Services within his department is working hard to process the applications received. Payments have already started to issue for businesses in the Derry and Strabane District Council area, which have been under restriction since the 5th of October. Payments for businesses in the other council areas will begin issuing, I'm glad to say, with effect from next week. We know that for many local businesses, the biggest cost that they continue to face are wages as they try to support their staff. The Finance Minister has been pressing the British Government to fill the gaps in the job support scheme. That support package will be complemented by the Business Support Scheme, brought forward by our Economy Minister today, and Diane will set out the detail for you on that in a moment. In addition, it is welcome news today that the British Treasury has listened and reduced the employer contribution to employee wages and the time required for an employee to be in work. The news that payments are to be doubled under the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme will provide a much-needed relief to thousands of citizens right across the north. People taking action to self-isolate when required is absolutely crucial in breaking the transmission of COVID-19. But we also know that this can create a really acute financial pressure for households. And I want to remind people that assistance in those circumstances is available to you. Back in March, then Communities Minister Deirdre Hargey introduced enhancements to the discretionary support scheme to support people affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And that includes a non-repayable COVID-19 living expenses grant to assist with short-term living costs, where a person or any member of their immediate family is diagnosed with COVID-19 or is advised to self-isolate. And applications for this support can be made online via an iDirect or through the free phone. The Executive will continue to do all that we can to provide support within our means and to push for the additional measures that are needed to protect livelihoods. Our emergency intervention is designed to buy time, to create space. Some fear that this intervention may simply lead on to another intervention. And many business leaders and other citizens and members of civic society have shared that concern with myself and others. Let me be very clear that that is not the Executive's strategy. We are determined to use this space to double down on developing an integrated strategy to normalise life and to maximise public safety in the coming months. Gura maigah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 1 week since the additional restrictions were agreed by the Executive, which sadly saw many sectors of our economy close down again. As I have said many times over the past few months, any restrictions, lockdowns, circuit breakers, whatever you call them, will have an impact on the economy and will ultimately risk costing jobs. The steady rebuilding progress, which had shown some green shoots of recovery in Q3 this year, has been halted or reversed for many. Those employed directly in hospitality, close contact services, or for those providing services for our bars, restaurants and cafes. Once again, they are being asked to make sacrifices in order to protect everyone's health. Last week I met with the Northern Ireland Hotels Federation, where I had the opportunity to listen to those in the industry outline the impact of restrictions on their workers and on their incomes. It made for difficult, if not unfamiliar, listening. Businesses need help, and of course I welcome the opening of the localised restrictions support scheme run by the Finance Minister. However, not all businesses that have been impacted by the new restrictions can access funding through this scheme. So today I'm announcing that the COVID Restrictions Business Support Scheme will provide grant payments to those businesses impacted by the latest restrictions who have not been able to access support. The grant will cover a 4-week period. The first tranche of the scheme is targeted at those businesses forced to close as a result of the recent health protection regulations that are not eligible for the localised support scheme, i.e. those who do not operate from a rateable premises. For example, driving instructors, close contact businesses such as hairdressers, beauticians, who operate on a mobile basis or indeed from their own home. If eligible, they will qualify for a weekly grant of £600. The second tranche will cover businesses not forced to close, but that are within the supply chain of those businesses restricted within the regulations and have been significantly impacted as a result of those restrictions. Examples of these could be food service companies or cleaning companies that supply services for hotels and restaurants. Businesses paying rates in this category will be eligible for the following payments. £400 a week per business where their rateable value is less than £15,000, £600 per week where that rateable value is between 15 and 51, and £800 per week where it is greater than 51,000. If your business is not rateable, you can apply for a business grant of £300 per week. I understand that there are many who have been unable to access support to date, and this funding is aimed at supporting those individuals and sectors. However, I have also asked my officials to develop a tourism and hospitality scheme to address gaps within current funding, including traditional pubs, which have now been closed almost continuously since March. I am also bringing forward a scheme for those newly self-employed who were not eligible for support under the Chancellor's Self-Employment Support Scheme. Work is ongoing between my department and the Department of Finance on both of these schemes, and I will announce the details in the near future. Nationally, the Job Retention Scheme has been essential, and while the replacement announced by the Chancellor a few weeks ago fell short of what was required, today's announcement on the face of it seems to be much more attractive for employers who will now be asked to make a 5% contribution to unworked hours, and hopefully this is an intervention that will stave off redundancies in Northern Ireland. While all of these interventions are to be welcomed, let me be clear. The greatest support to our business community and the best hope of saving jobs is to allow the economy to safely reopen and allow businesses to trade. We all have a part to play in making that happen. And like our colleagues here today, I appeal to everyone to follow the clear health guidance: wash your hands, socially distance, wear a mask. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tracy McGee, UTV. I don't like normally doing this with a question, but I can ask you a two-pronged question. First of all, First Minister, we now hear that there are 4 executive ministers all self-isolating. So I wonder if you can say anything to reassure the public that the business of government will continue unabated. And also then, this is the first time that the executive has met since Edwin Poote's controversial comments last week. Can you tell us, was it discussed today? And can I ask the Junior Minister, Declan Kearney, given that his party has rejected Mr Poote's clarification yesterday, does he still believe that the Agriculture Minister is attempting to take Northern Ireland down a sectarian rabbit hole?
Thank you, Tracy. First of all, Edwin did make a clarification yesterday. I think it was important that he did that because, from his point of view, he would never have intended to offend anyone in the community. And as we know, the virus is unfortunately present right across all of our communities in Northern Ireland, and that's why we're so focused on making sure that we use the time available to us now to focus on the challenge of the first part of your question, which was around the challenge of living with the virus and having a strategy to make sure that we can live with the virus when we come out of these time-limited restrictions which we're currently in. I have to say, I thought today, and obviously Declan will comment for himself, but I thought it was a very focused executive today. I thought we had a good strategic view of the road that we were going towards, because I think there is, as I said in my comments, whilst there will of course be differences of opinion and nuance and all of that within a 5-party executive, I don't take away from any of my colleagues the fact that we are all trying to do what is right for the people of Northern Ireland. In terms of our colleagues that are self-isolating, As you know, the Deputy First Minister has been self-isolating for some time, and that certainly hasn't stopped the business of government proceeding, and we will continue to proceed. We had our executive meeting today by Zoom for, I think it was over 3 hours, so that will continue. The business of government will continue because we know that we are at risk like anyone else in the community, and it's important that we protect ourselves when we are alerted to the fact that we may have been exposed to COVID-19.
Thanks, Arlene, and thanks, Tracy. We did have a very focused strategic discussion today. I agree with Arlene. Last Tuesday night, our executive met at length, and we came to a very united position in relation to how we would go through the next 4 weeks. So I'm personally and politically hugely disappointed at what has happened in the course of the last period of days. I think people have made their minds up around what has been said. I don't think that anyone should be sectarianising COVID-19 or this pandemic. I think that is what has happened. There's no place for sectarianism either within our executive or within our wider society. And our executive needs to speak with a united voice and to act decisively and cohesively. And I believe, arising from today's meeting, that the clear resolve of our executive is to do precisely that, to move forward, to give reassurance, to give hope, to set out a clear plan for our people, and to let them know that we will do everything that we can on a united basis as 5 parties in a power-sharing coalition to get in control of the spread of the virus. That's what I believe our people want, and that's what I believe our executive is committed to delivering. In respect of executive members who are now self-isolating, it won't disrupt the work of the executive. I have acquired the moniker this afternoon as Sinn Féin's designated survivor. I'm the sole standing member of the Sinn Féin team at the executive for now. I intend that to be the case, but I do look forward to when Michelle and Carol and Connor join all the rest of us in relation to the collective work that we have ahead of us in the coming weeks.
Follow-up question. Can I ask then the Economy Minister, you've announced this package today and you've acknowledged that this is to try and help the businesses that didn't qualify for help last week from the Finance Minister's scheme. But we know of other businesses, for instance, the coach and freight industry, who have said that they have had next to no help. So can you reassure them that what has been announced today will reach them today?
Well, really, the schemes that were announced by the Finance Minister and myself today are really very focused on the 4-week period that we have of these fairly high restrictions in Northern Ireland. And the Finance Minister's scheme is based around the rate space. And obviously, the scheme that I announced today is to try to help those people who do not operate from a rateable premise. So if you're a hairdresser, you hire a chair in a hairdresser's larger premise, but you're largely self-employed and no longer able to work, you will be able to apply under the scheme that we have announced today. And obviously the scheme goes a little bit further and is a little bit ahead of what the Chancellor announced just at lunchtime, and actually looks at those businesses who are in the supply chain. So it is a fairly comprehensive package of measures open to all businesses, no matter what how they operate or how they have constructed their business model today. And just at the executive meeting, we had a further conversation with the Infrastructure Minister, who I understand intends to write seeking the power to bring forward a scheme for taxis, coaches and haulage within the next week or so. So that work is ongoing.
Can't hear you, Gareth. I think you're on mute, Gareth.
Okay, is that better?
That's better.
That's good. Start again. First question for Minister Dodds. why did you not announce the scheme that you've announced today last week when these restrictions were announced? Why the lag? And second question for Arlene Foster. You voted today to extend the free school meals for the 2 weeks for the holidays for Northern Ireland. Why then did your MPs, the majority of your MPs, think all but one, abstain when a similar scheme was voted on in the Commons for England yesterday?
Okay, if I can go first. The reason for the bringing forward my scheme at this particular time is simply that we had to judge the parameters and the coverage that the first scheme would actually do, so that we would know exactly where we were and that we weren't double funding in different sectors. So it's just a practical reason, Gareth, nothing more than that. And of course my officials have been working extremely hard. This is quite a complex thing to do. And it's much easier to give out grants based on rateable value and where premises are easily identifiable. We've been trying to look at sectors, look at the people that have been impacted and how we can help those, some of them individuals in low-paid jobs where they are very, very gravely impacted. I intend to get this up and running as quickly as possible and payment out as quickly as possible.
Yes, so in relation to the free school meals, I think this is a really good news story for Northern Ireland. The fact is that we're not just making provision for those children who aren't at school this week. We're actually saying, because we recognise the pressures that there are on a lot of families right across Northern Ireland, that we're also going to make direct provision for the following week as well, which ordinarily they wouldn't be able to avail of if the children had been at school this week. So we think that that is a good news story, Gareth, and one that I hope people will recognise right across Northern Ireland. In terms of my colleagues in Westminster, of course, that you're right to point out that it was an England and Wales matter. If you have evil votes, as they're called, England-only votes, we rarely take part in those votes. Some people do. Jim Shannon, for example, voted in favour of having free school meals in England and Wales, but because it's just an England and Wales matter and doesn't apply to Northern Ireland, our colleagues just abstained last night. So I think that's quite understandable.
Arlene, in an article in the newsletter today, and a large part of the theme of your remarks today, you say you cannot keep closing the country down. The strategy is designed to buy time, but it's in reality a failure. It will ensure total despair engulfs all of our people. We cannot allow that to happen. Every part of our society must adapt and learn to live with the virus. Are you signalling now that the DUP in 3 weeks' time will not support another lockdown? Is that absolutely certain? And how are we going to live with the virus without a vaccine? And if I can ask Declan Kearney to clarify, Declan, were you saying that Sinn Féin will not support another lockdown in 3 weeks' time as well?
I think what we're saying is that we recognise that you cannot have a continuous circuit of turning the economy on and turning the economy off, because when you go to turn it, it's a bit like a tap. If you go at some time to turn it on again, there'll be no water there. You can't turn the tap on and off in that fashion. And just in that respect, Diane has already talked about the number of job losses and what have you. So we cannot keep injuring our economy, because not only, of course, is that really bad for people's jobs and way of life in terms of the economy, but of course it then has a knock-on impact on poverty, on people's mental health. There are going to be bad health outcomes as well from us turning the economy on and off. So I think strategically we have to look at things in a different way. We have to see what other interventions we can take, because we all recognise that the virus is going to be with us for a length of time. So what is it that we can do differently? How can we make our businesses COVID secure, for example? Is it around, and I'm sure Declan will want to comment on the testing programme, is it around doing more on testing? What is our capacity of our hospitals? How can we be more smart in relation to how we do things? Look, we all recognise that this time-limited intervention that we're in at present has been damaging to the economy, and we want to find a new way of doing things. I think we did need an intervention, and I think, doing nothing was not an option last week, because the R number was at 1.5, 1.6. We need to get that down below 1. When we get it down below 1, then we have a strategy to deal with matters moving forward that doesn't involve going into lockdowns again.
Yes, to pick up where Arlene has left off, we met with business leaders yesterday and today, and one of the points I made to them yesterday was that last Tuesday we were faced with a cliff edge. So we had to make a very, very clear decision how to deal with that scenario which we were presented with. And truthfully, none of us are clairvoyants. We can't see into the future. We are determined that this intervention will work and that its objective of suppressing the virus should be achieved, and we're absolutely determined in that regard. But as politicians and pragmatists, no option should be left off the table. That said, I made very clear in my remarks at the beginning of this press conference that our strategy is not to move from one intervention to come out of it and then to move into another intervention. So we need to make this work. We've been given time, we've bought time, and now we need to double down on a number of key priorities. We have to look after our businesses and those who are most vulnerable within our society. We have to look after and protect and maximise our approach towards our care homes. We need to double down critically in ensuring that we have the necessary resilience within our test, track, trace, isolate and support programme. And we had a very good conversation about how we should do that today. So that's work that needs to go forward in the coming week or two. And we also have to double down in relation to our approach towards north-south coordination, because the challenges we face are similar north and south. And when you look at what's happening along the border corridor, it's very frightening for people in Cavan and people in Fermanagh. So we need to have joint interventions that ensures that lives are saved in that particular area. We are now, I believe, embarked on something very ambitious. We were told that what we did last week was unique on these islands, and it was at that point in time. Others have now followed the approach that we are taking in terms of this kind of decisive intervention. But our ambition must now to be that we suppress, with community buy-in, support, compliance and partnership, the virus, and then on the basis of having achieved that, that we put in place a strategy which allows this region and our society to coexist with COVID-19 in as normalised a way and as safe a way as possible until such times as we are given a vaccine for the virus.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Good afternoon all. I'm Rebecca Black from PA Media. First Minister, how is it possible to rule out another lockdown or further extreme restrictions? It seems reasonable to assume that once we come out of these restrictions, when people start mixing more, the virus will start spreading more. The Chief Scientific Officer himself had suggested there could be another lockdown coming up when we come out of this. Ultimately, until there is a vaccine, there is no way of ultimately controlling the virus in that respect. Junior Minister Kearney, you were talking about North-South cooperation, made a reference to it. It's not working too well today with the scenes at the border in Uri. There are massive queues of traffic because of the checks. Is there any conversation going about that to make sure that the border is going to be passable? And to the Economy Minister, are you confident that the grant scheme is going to be enough to help businesses? I was speaking to restaurant owners earlier this week who are talking about having to sell off property, they're having to sell off vehicles. One of them actually has accused Stormont of killing Belfast city centre.
So thanks, Rebecca. I think obviously you could go down the road of having circuit breaker, then a break, then another circuit breaker. We're saying that we don't think that is the way to proceed. We're saying that given the damage that it does to not just the economy but to wider society, to the life chances of our young people in particular, that we want to look at a different way of doing things. And that's what we're engaging in during the next couple of weeks to formulate the strategy, which will be a multi-layered integrated strategy. It will be something that will look at many different tracks, if you like, as to how we're going to deal with COVID-19. But we think we owe it to the people of Northern Ireland to do that, because we recognise the damage that is going on at present. And I think if we weren't listening, if we were saying that we were just going to keep doing circuit breaker after circuit breaker, then I think we would be deaf to the people that actually elect us here to do this job. And I've already said that I think all of us, regardless of our political party, are determined to do what is right for the people of Northern Ireland. Will there be differences from time to time? Of course there will be differences from time to time. But you know what? I like to look at the fact that we are all working together in the executive to try and do our best for the people of Northern Ireland. That's what I'm focused on. I think it's what the executive is focused on as well.
I think what we need to develop, and the media have a big role to play in assisting us do this over the course of the next 3 weeks, is to effect a huge cultural and behavioural shift in how we conduct our lives, both economically, in family terms, recreationally, in every walk of life. That's going to be crucial to ensuring that this intervention works. So we have introduced many restrictions, but the real appeal and the strength of this initiative will rest in the hands of every single citizen here in the North, accepting that the way through COVID-19, shy of a vaccine, is to change our behaviours in order that we can, in fact, do our best to normalise our lives and to coexist with this vicious pandemic in our midst. In terms of the question around what has happened today in North Louth, I think it's important to remember that North and South, we have similar guidance. We have a similar public health message, and that is not to engage in non-essential travel. So it's important that everyone understands that if you don't have to make that journey, you should not make that journey. And of course, police officers, whether it's in Garda Síochána or the PSNI, they obviously have to work in a very sensible and a very proportionate way to ensure that they facilitate life in these very, very difficult and challenging times. And my last point is this. I don't think that any of us should underestimate the fear within our society. There is a fear of this virus because it is unknown. And then there is a fear of the measures that we're introducing and the uncertainty that they can bring. And we're very, very sensitive and alive to that fear within society. So we're acting on the basis of attempting to address those fears and concerns in a very practical way, and we're appealing in turn to everyone here in the North to work with us to ensure that this intervention in fact gives us a successful outcome, and that we do indeed put that integrated strategy in place which is sustainable for the time being, for the time going forward.
Rebecca, I have a huge deal of sympathy for those in the hospitality and indeed the wider tourism industry in Belfast and indeed right across Northern Ireland. Many of them spend a lot of money trying to implement the measures that we ask them to do in order to reopen their businesses. And they have largely reopened safely and well. And some of them have had a reasonable summer, and some of them were even indicating reasonable levels of bookings going into the autumn, and many hotels are devastated. In fact, I was talking to one yesterday in the North Coast. They're devastated that that Halloween break for schools has been lost to them, because that was hugely, hugely important for the winter time going forward. So I can understand that devastation, and that's why I announce, and I'm announcing today, that I'm going to bring forward a further scheme for those tourism, hospitality businesses, and indeed specifically for those traditional pubs that we have kept almost continuously closed since March. We have to help people, and we have to ensure that strategically we have a tourism and hospitality industry that will survive COVID-19 and once again be able to flourish in the way that it should.
Okay, sorry, just as a follow-up, Minister Kearney, with respect, I think we've moved past fear now. I think we've moved into the sphere of complacency among many and anger among many. When you look at the hundreds of people who turned out to Stormont last weekend, you know, they're not talking about fear, they're talking about anger. And I'm sure politicians as well as journalists are getting a massive amount of it on Twitter, which is why I'm voicing scepticism about whether people may abide by the rules quite as much this time. So just to ask your response on that. And then in terms of the Stop COVID app, obviously it's going to be a major tool in trying to control the virus and in terms of trying to enforce people self-isolating, is there any consideration being given to removing that anonymity element of the app in order to be able to trace those who should be self-isolating, to make sure that they are and that they're not in fact walking around and potentially spreading the virus to others?
We'll split the difference in relation to the fear factor. I think it does exist. And yes, there's a lot of anger. There are a lot of angry business people who are worried about their businesses going down the tubes. There's a lot of people who are really concerned about whether they're going to have a job at the end of the year. And there are a lot of our older people who thought that perhaps we had moved into a better space, and now they know that we haven't. And they are very frightened about what we're asking them to do, because they don't know what lies on the other side. And it's our job as political leaders to ensure that that certainty and that calm is restored to their lives. In terms of the anger, it stems from a fatigue. We're all tired of COVID-19. We've been living with it for months. So I do accept that people are fatigued and they're annoyed at the fact that there seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel. But what I don't buy is this. I don't buy fake news. I don't buy the idea that this isn't real, that it's not vicious, that it's not contagious, and that it does not need a very robust response from our executive. And that is what we are seeking to do. We're trying to act compassionately, but we're also trying to act in a very integrated, strategic way. And in terms of the Stop COVID NI app, we actually discussed that again also at the executive today, and I know that our technical people are constantly assessing the operability and the effectiveness of the app to ensure that it gives us the type of data that we require to ensure that this strategy will work.
Well, I think just very quickly, Rebecca, to finish off on the Stop COVID app piece, I mean, one of the ways we get people to download the app is that they understand that the data is theirs and is not shared, and we do have to protect everybody's individual data. So that would, I mean, if people thought we were just using their data without asking their permission, then they would stop using the app, frankly, and we don't want that to happen, because we do want people to avail of the app, because it's a great tool in alerting them to the fact that they've been close to someone with COVID-19. Go ahead, Alison.
Hi. Can I ask Minister Dodds first, the measures that you have announced today for those working in close contact retail, do you accept that those measures should have been put in place before last Friday's lockdown, and that the delay in implementing those measures has caused distress to a sector that the Department of Health's own evidence bank accepted was going to impact those mostly women and mostly people on low income, who have had to wait until today to find out what support was going to be in place for them?
Thank you, Alison. I think that these are really, really difficult circumstances. You make the points, many of which I made at the executive meetings, around the impact of restrictions, lockdowns, circuit breakers, whatever you want to call them, that they generally target those on low income, those on 0 hours contracts or part-time contracts, and you make exactly the points that I have reiterated on many occasions. And support that we have announced today is part of a package of measures, and it is one that I intend to get out as quickly as possible to those people who are in need. I intend to pay it in 2 tranches. One is the individual support payment, and we hope that because that is a simple payment, that will be able to go out very, very quickly. And the second tranche will be the assessment of the impact on businesses that are within the supply chain, and that is how we hope to do it.
Can I also ask, just Minister Carney, you had said that we're at this stage now in this circuit break because we fell off a cliff edge. Could I ask both yourself and the First Minister, is the fact that the summer months were basically squandered and preparation wasn't done to prepare us for this second wave that meant that we did fall off a cliff edge, What assurances can you give that during this 4-week period that the Executive will put proper measures in place to ensure that come January we're not flung back into another second circuit break?
I didn't say that we had fallen off a cliff edge. I did say that last Tuesday night we faced a cliff edge, and that absent decisive intervention and action, that was the prospect that faced us. So we have now acted decisively. What we're seeing through August and September right up until now is not a phenomenon confined to this island, to Ireland. We're seeing the virus once more rage across continental Europe, indeed across the globe. There are frightening figures in France and Spain and various other European countries, and it is impacting directly on our island as well, and we're seeing it in our neighbouring island and in England, Scotland and Wales. So the intervention is about, as I said, buying time, doubling down on key priorities, making sure that the necessary financial supports are put in place to keep people afloat, to ensure that that test, trace, track, isolate and support system is heavily invested in order that that gives us the bandwidth to be able to actually deal with the scale of the levels of transmission that we're currently confronting. I'm confident that the Executive has a clear fix on what it needs to do, and now in the coming days and into next week we're going to drill down on the specificity of the different measures that are required to give us resilient foundations for this intervention so that it does work. But is that in itself going to eradicate coronavirus? No, it's not. Because coronavirus is not just a threat to health, it's a threat to the economy. And left unchecked, it becomes an accelerator to a race to the bottom for our whole society, for the most vulnerable, for the poor, for workers, people on 0 hours contracts, and for our older people. And this, I can tell you, this Executive is, whatever about other political differences, philosophical differences, this Executive is absolutely committed to ensuring that we act in lockstep to protect our people in the coming period and to ensure that we are successful in doing so.
And I think, Alison, one of the things that people forget about is the fact that this is novel coronavirus, so it's new. So it behaves in a different way than perhaps other viruses have behaved. And we now know that it is a seasonal virus, and therefore it fell away somewhat during the summer months. And unfortunately, we all, myself included, became quite relaxed about some of the restrictions and regulations, social distancing, masks, all of those issues. So we have now, then the virus grew quite rapidly, and I think our Chief Scientific Officer is on record of saying that he was even taken aback by how quickly the virus accelerated. And so therefore we did need an intervention to deal with this issue, and then when we get the R below 1 again, we do have to do things differently. So to take the phrase novel, we do need to do novel things to deal with what's in front of us, and we're determined to find a pathway that is right for Northern Ireland and to find a pathway that does the maximum damage to the virus but the minimum damage to society as a whole, and that's what we're trying to do in our strategy.
Evening, Nigel Gould, Downtown Radio and Cool FM. Look, a couple of questions from me, if I may. To the First Minister specifically, wondering if you can clear up once and for all the position of the Executive with regard to fans attending elite outdoor sports events. There still seems to be some confusion, and certainly Michelle O'Neill, for example, told Cool FM this week that it was still an unresolved issue. Ulster Rugby have said no to fans for the next couple of games, and IFA Chief Executive Patrick Nelson this morning basically said that they could allow fans in safely, albeit in smaller numbers, as they had done previously. But they still want to abide by the rules. The problem is the rules aren't really there. Can we finally get a ruling on this before another weekend of potential chaos, which happened in the Irish League last week? And also for the Economy Minister and the Junior Minister. In that same interview with us, the Deputy First Minister didn't rule out another circuit breaker lockdown before Christmas. Would you accept, though, that if this does happen, and no one seems to have ruled this out today despite the questions, like many in the hospitality sector, for example, they're telling us that this would not only be catastrophic economically, but it would also be something from which we would never recover. Can I get your views on that, please?
So thank you, Nigel. And there you see the benefits of doing an interview with Cool FM, is that it is then repeated back to other ministers and challenge them on that whole issue. Nigel, can I just say in relation to spectators, it's very clear from the regulations that at elite sports that you are allowed spectators. I think different sporting codes will take different decisions in relation to that issue. But as far as the regulations go, in elite sports you are allowed to have spectators, obviously risk assessed, and I think the IFA have been very clear about that in terms of their Premiership games and indeed the Northern Ireland match against Slovakia, which is on the 12th of November, as I understand. So that's the position in relation to that issue.
Thank you, yes, for your question, Nigel. I'm on record as having said that lockdowns are extremely damaging to the economy. The economy is not a light switch. You can't switch it on, switch it off, expect everything to stay the same and for no impacts. If we look at what has happened after the lockdown in March, April and May, in February, we were patting ourselves in the back and telling each other we'd be doing a great job, that we had one of the lowest rates of unemployment right across the whole United Kingdom. Today, that unemployment rate has more than doubled. In fact, has risen by 108% from the February figure. That's the impact of lockdown. That's the impact on the economy and on people's lives and on families and individuals across Northern Ireland. Output in the economy down by almost 12%. That is the impact for individual businesses. So can we afford another lockdown? No, I don't think we can. And I think we should do everything that we can to avoid that. I think we need to do what the First Minister said, get ourselves together for a strategy that actually helps us to manage the virus. Let everyone take personal responsibility for that and exercise personal responsibility for their own selves and their own way of life and ensure that economically our health is a lot better than it has been over the past year.
If I could just come back with just a follow-up there very, very quickly. Yeah, I do get that, and certainly the vaccine has been mentioned again today. Unfortunately, the World Health Organization have gone on record many times saying that this probably won't be able to be rolled out to the public until the end of next year. If that's the case, then should we not actually be looking right now at a much better balanced strategy? Because it seems to me that this current one doesn't really help anyone.
I absolutely agree with that. I think we should be looking at a more balanced strategy. I think the First Minister's article in some of the newspapers today actually indicated that is the way that the Executive will go. We will have to learn to live and to manage this. We'll have to try and make our businesses COVID secure. We'll have to enable people to go to work, to restore footfall in Belfast city centre, as one of the other questions related to. These are all hugely important things for the economy, but also for the normalisation of life, the ability to see our family, socialise, be out and about and do normal everyday things. That's what a healthy society does, and that's where we need to get to.
And just to follow on that point, I take the view that it's COVID-19 which is a disaster for our economy, and our function has to be to make the necessary interventions to secure our economy, to stabilise our economy, to give reassurance, to give confidence to employers and also to employees, as well as the wider message of compliance that we want to take forward within wider society. We're committed to a partnership as an executive, committed to a partnership with our hospitality industry, with our retailers, with other employers, and we're committed to a partnership of working with other social partners, including our trade unions. That's what we mean when we talk about a whole society approach, where together we can bring together all of our insights, our expertise, and then our influence within wider society to ensure that what I believe is the basis of a balanced strategy over the next 4 weeks is in fact bottomed out, implement it successfully. And leadership is key to all of that. It needs to come from the top, from within the executive, but leadership also begins at the ground level, within local communities and local neighbourhoods. And we will rely upon our business and our other social partner leaders to assist us in this period. And that's why I welcome the type of leadership that's been demonstrated by our sporting codes. And I'm confident that following on from Common Class Gael, from Ulster Rugby, we will see that same kind of leadership we've been able to rely upon within our sporting codes to continue to be given in the coming period.
Thank you.